Horrifying discovery, 12 sinister Buddha statues revealed within a cursed Viking settlement. A hush fell over Meadowbrook when the local paper blared the headlines. Horrifying discovery, 12 sinister Buddha statues revealed within a cursed Viking settlement. Sarah sat up straight in her kitchen chair, the clink of her coffee mug echoing ominously. She had heard the legends whispered around town, old wives' tales carved from fear and caution. Now, cameras captured the darkness dwelling just beyond their idyllic facade. A shiver crawled up her spine. If the tales were true, something vile was awakening. As dusk slipped into night, a knock shattered the stillness. Jake, the teenage neighbor, stood on her porch, a manic glint in his eyes. "You gotta see this," he insisted, gesturing excitedly. He pulled out his phone, and the eerie glow illuminated the haunting figures of the statues, their cracked faces peering through the shadows. Each belly resided in grotesque symmetry, the chipped stone darkened by a malevolence that felt alive. Lily and Ben were asleep, but Sarah felt their dreams tremble, not from peaceful slumber, but something darker lurking at the edges of their innocence. She brushed her fingers along the windowpane as Jake scrolled through the video. It felt as if the statues were staring right back at her, their empty eyes soaking in despair. It struck her then, this wasn't just an old story, it was real, breathing, throwing shadows across the town. Suddenly, a scratching sound flared from outside. Heart pounding, she exchanged a worried glance with Jake. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. The crickets had stopped chirping, and a thick silence curled around them. Jake shrugged, but she could see the unease creeping into his youthful bravado. "It's probably nothing," he said, but the tremble in his voice betrayed him. Sarah sensed an urgent whisper from her children's rooms. She brushed aside her feelings of dread, hoping it was just the wind. Days passed, and the unsettling occurrences grew, slipping into her life like ink in water. Loud thumps rang from the attic, moans echoed down the hall. Lily and Ben awoke nightly, recounting nightmares about a woman in shadows, an old terror gnashing at their dreams. "Mommy, there's something in my closet," Ben cried, his tiny voice breaking her heart. Unable to dismiss their fears, Sarah's voice trembled as she soothed them. "It's just your imagination, honey." But deep inside, she quelled the growing suspicion festering like a blister. Then came the news: another child had gone missing. Panic seeped through the streets of Meadowbrook. Families locked doors, glances turned wary, neighbor turned against neighbor. The whispers thickened, smothering truth beneath the weight of fear. How could something like this happen here, in the safety of their quaint town? Before we continue, I need to tell you something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to their system and many people are missing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and select all notifications so you don't miss future videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps me with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she scoured the town's archives, uncovering dust-covered stories of betrayal and darkness, a sickening truth emerged. The statues weren't mere relics of the past, they were a craggy link binding human souls to a far worse fate. A full-blown terror gripped her as the growing shadows pulled tighter around her family. Standing at the threshold of her own home, she found herself paralyzed, every instinct screaming, "Run!" The air thickened, whispering secrets that no one should know, a malevolence awakening like a storm. The dread coiled like a snake around her throat. Out there, among the familiar faces of her neighbors, danger loomed, twisting smiles into sinister shapes. With a racing heart, she realized the shadows were here, breathing, watching. Would she escape this evil clutching at her family? Or would the shadows close in and consume them all? A piercing shriek shattered the night, yanking Sarah from her thoughts like a swift kick to the stomach. It came from Lily's room. Panic surged in her chest as she bolted down the hall, her mind racing. "I'm coming, sweetheart." She reached the door and flung it open, not prepared for the sight within. Lily sat up in bed, eyes wide with terror, the quilt tangled around her small frame. "Mommy, she was here." Her voice trembled, a raw edge of despair piercing through the dim light. "Who, honey? Who was here?" Sarah knelt beside her daughter, gripping her hand tightly as dread wrapped around her heart like a vice. "The woman. The one from my dreams." She came out of the closet. Ben, now beside them, clutched his sister's arm, his small body quaking. "I saw her too, Mommy. She had dark hair and her eyes, they were all black." The air in the room felt different, charged with an unspeakable anxiety. Sarah's skin prickled, and she turned to glimpse the closet door, slightly ajar. Shadows pooled at the edge, swirling like fog, as if something malevolent awaited just beyond the surface. "Stay close," she whispered, rising slowly, the floorboards creaking beneath her trembling feet. She ventured towards the closet, heart drumming wildly, the oppressive silence wrapped around her like a tomb. Each step felt exaggerated, echoing in the stillness. She reached for the door, hesitating one last moment. As she pulled it open, the dim light sliced through darkness, revealing nothing but clothes hung haphazardly. But then the temperature dropped, a rush of icy air surged forward, a frigid wind that seemed to exhale premonitions. Sarah shuddered, gripping the door frame with white knuckles. Suddenly, she noticed a reflection in the cracked mirror on the closet door. A shadowy figure standing behind her, lips stretched in a ghoulish smile. Whipping around, she found herself face to face with only the somber emptiness of the room. "Mommy?" Lily's voice broke through the fog of fear, pulling her back. "What's wrong?" I'm not sure." Her voice cracked, betraying her resolve as she stepped back from the closet, closing the door with a swift motion. The children looked frightened, the magic of childhood innocence shattered. And then the scratching sound returned, more insistent than before, scraping against the attic above. An ominous tapping, like fingernails on wood, clawing its way into the silence of their home. "Mommy, make it stop." Ben wailed, his face a mask of terror, and her heart sank. She placed a hand on his cheek, forcing a smile as if to shield him from the creeping despair. "It's just the house settling," she lied, but even she didn't believe it. Something was wrong, and she could feel it, lurking in the corners, flickering just out of sight. With a sudden resolve, she decided to confront the fear head-on. "Let us go check the attic." The children exchanged fearful glances, but she squared her shoulders, refusing to back down. As she clambered up the stairs, her pulse quickening with each creaky step, reality twisted into a surreal nightmare. The attic door loomed ahead, its ominous dark yawning before her. Now or never, she thought, gripping the handle with sweaty palms. She swung the door open, the hinges screeching in protest. The musty air hit her like a wall, thick and suffocating. Dust motes danced in the dim light, but the attic felt alive, pulsating with hidden secrets. Tremors of dread washed over her, grazing her skin as she scanned the space. The statues, they felt closer, almost tangible, their presence an unseen weight pushing down on her chest. Just then, a frantic rustle echoed from an old box in the corner, and time itself seemed to slow. "Mommy," Lily whispered, clutching her brother's trembling hand. A shadow shifted behind the box, dark and serpentine. Returning her gaze to her children, she gritted her teeth. "Stay here." But she had a sickening feeling. The shadows were reaching. What was it that had awakened? And more terrifying, why did it feel like it was coming for them? Sarah took a step forward into the thickening darkness, her heart racing, as something within the shadows stirred. The air grew weighty with an inexplicable dread as Sarah stepped deeper into the attic's murky depths. The dust swirled around her, catching the fading light from the single bulb hanging above. The sound of her children's whispering breaths filled her ears, mingling with the unsettling scratching that now seemed to echo in her mind. What had she heard? Or had she imagined it? She felt the specter of apprehension pressing against her chest, each heartbeat drumming a frantic reminder of the looming danger. "Mommy, please don't go," Ben's small voice trembled from the doorway, pulling at her resolve. "We'll be okay, I promise," she replied, though the words felt hollow. She edged further into the attic, flicking on her cell phone's flashlight to illuminate the darkness. Shadows danced across the walls, teasing her sanity. As her pulse raced with each step, the old box in the corner loomed larger, its edges obscured by dust. It whispered secrets of the past, beckoning her closer. The scratching transformed, now resembling whispers coiling around her mind like smoke. With each breath, she felt an unseen force wrap tighter around her, fueling a deep-set panic. As she reached the box, she paused, her hands hovered above it like a fragile bridge between curiosity and terror. Taking a breath, she flung the lid open. The contents spilled out, aged photographs, brittle letters, and statues, dozens of them. Each one depicting a grotesque figure, twisted and deformed. Half-finished, as if someone had been interrupted mid-chisel, they multiplied in her horrified gaze, Buddhas with sinister smiles and empty eyes, macabre in their imperfection. "What are these?" she breathed, her heart racing. She peered closely, dread creeping through her veins like ice water. One of the statues seemed to shift ever so slightly, a flicker of movement that unspooled every shred of courage she had. "Mommy!" Lily's voice was a shriek, breaking the stillness. Sarah spun around as a sudden dark presence bore down upon them, wrapping around her like barbed wire. The scratching noise intensified, growing louder until it became a cacophony that drowned out her thoughts, an overwhelming roar of malicious intent. "Get back!" she shouted, instinctively lunging towards her children. The flashlight beam danced wildly, catching glimpses of movement in the far recesses of the attic. A figure twisted in the shadows, a woman, her silhouette barely discernible but radiating a palpable hunger. "Mommy, Mommy!" Ben cried, his voice shattering the fragile equilibrium. "Run!" Sarah commanded, fear clawing at her throat as she shoved them toward the staircase. But as they turned, the attic door slammed shut with a resounding bang. They were trapped. The darkness thickened, and the statues seemed to watch with their soulless eyes, the air charging with a sinister energy that made her skin crawl. "Why are you here?" A whisper slithered through the air, chilling her blood. It came from every corner of the attic, penetrating her mind as if the shadows themselves spoke. The oppressive weight of dread bore down, and Sarah realized the shadows weren't just part of the attic. They were an entity, a collective of darkness that hungered for her and her children. Then, as if answering an unspoken prayer, the attic's light flickered, revealing the statue clawing at the wooden floor, inching towards them. The eyes, once blank, were now ablaze with malice. "What do they want?" Sarah whispered, her voice trembling as panic surged back through her. The shadows seemed to swirl in response, whispering like an angry tide, pushing her toward the edge of sanity. In that moment, she understood the truth. The statues were more than mere stone, they were guardians of a dark power, part of a curse that bound her family to this place. But what choice did she have? With nowhere to go, she prepared to face whatever horror was drawing closer. As the chilling breath of the darkness enveloped her, she realized she had one last chance. Would she dare to confront the shadows and what they wanted, or would it consume her whole? The thought of escape clashed with the allure of the dark as her pulse raced, heartbeat synchronizing with the malevolent whispers closing in. The chilling question remained: could they survive what came next, or was this the end of their story? In the deafening silence that followed, the air felt electric, as if the very fabric of the attic was holding its breath, waiting. Sarah's mind raced. She had to protect her kids. The shadows pulsed like a heartbeat, and the scratching grew to a fever pitch, as if the unseen horror was preparing to pounce. "Stay close!" she yelled, her voice cracking. Desperation clawed at her throat as she edged back, holding her children tight against her sides. The darkness pressed in, suffocating, bending the light around them, warping reality into something foreign and wicked. "Mommy!" Lily's voice wavered. Her little body trembled against Sarah's, fear radiating off her like heat. Ben clutched her hand, knuckles white, eyes wide with terror. In a sudden burst of defiance, Sarah swung the flashlight to illuminate the closest statue. The beam caught the rough texture of its surface, sharp angles and desperate lines twisted into a grotesque expression of agony. It seemed to leer at her, a sick grin carved into its stone lips. Then she noticed it. A circular base beneath its feet, engraved with symbols that looked both ancient and alien. The moment she focused on it, the ground shuddered beneath them, a vibration that sent chills down her spine. "Look at it, Mommy!" Ben shouted, pointing. "It's moving." She spun again, breath catching in her throat. The statues were shifting, not just the one, but all of them. The once innocent charm of the attic now morphed into a nightmarish hall of horrors as heads turned and eyes followed. The light flickered on each one, revealing fresh, sinewy lines that wept with what appeared to be dark, tar-like fluid. "What do we do?" Sarah gasped, her heart thundering like a war drum. The whispers merged into a haunting choir, calling her name, mixing her fear with their dark desires. Suddenly, the attic felt larger, the shadows deeper. She staggered back, forcing her children behind her. The oppressive weight of the horror around them felt almost palpable, like a thick fog enveloping their senses. "Get out!" came a voice, sharp as glass. Not her own. Not from Ben or Lily. It was a woman's voice, echoing through the attic like a banshee's wail. "Mommy!" The children cried as Sarah turned toward the sound, pulse racing. The silhouette of the woman loomed larger, swirling with the shadows as she moved closer, her presence a fusion of pain and sorrow. "What do you want?" Sarah shouted, afraid yet compelled, as if the shadows themselves were wrapping around her thoughts. "Leave us alone." The woman's eyes glinted like obsidian. "You have disturbed the silence of the damned." With a crack like thunder, the statue nearest to them lunged forward, striking the wooden floor, sending splinters flying. Sarah's instinct screamed at her to flee, yet the door loomed like a sealed fate behind them. "Run! Run!" she yelled, adrenaline pumping through her veins. She pushed her children in front of her, but the shadows conspired against them, thickening in the corners, blocking their path. "Mommy, help!" Ben cried, as the oppressive darkness seemed to clutch at his tiny frame, tugging him back toward the statues. "No! No!" Sarah screamed, lunging forward to grab him just as the shadow reached for him, fingers closing around his ankle. She yanked him free, twisting in horror as something icy brushed against her arm. "Look!" Lily pointed toward the back of the attic. The flickering light revealed a trapdoor, half hidden behind the pile of statues, its edge barely visible, a sliver of hope amid the chaos. "Over there!" Sarah barked, knowing they had to risk it. They moved toward the faint outline, the statues vibrating with rage. But would they reach that door before the shadows consumed them? "Mommy, hurry!" Ben yelled, terror intertwining with their urgency as they raced toward the small sanctuary that might be their salvation. A new, hollow whisper poured from the darkness, resonating in a voice that sent icy chills through her. "You cannot escape, you belong to us." As they approached the trapdoor, the frantic rhythm of her heartbeat drummed louder, drowning out the whispers. What awaited them on the other side? Was it truly an escape, or a deeper descent into madness? "Mommy!" Ben screamed as the shadows lunged again, rage and despair mixing in the air. In that moment, as they reached the door, Sarah knew that the ultimate test was coming. Would they find light, or was this their final moment in the maw of darkness? As Sarah reached for the trapdoor, the air thickened like molasses. Every nerve in her body screamed for her to turn back. The shadows twisted violently, as if alive, slithering along the floorboards like snakes waiting to strike. "Mommy!" Ben's voice cracked, pulling her from the hypnotic terror of the figures surrounding them. She dared a glance over her shoulder. The woman stood closer now, her anguished face a mere breath away, eyes shimmering with an unsettling mixture of despair and hunger. "Run!" Sarah urged as she flung the trapdoor open, a gust of stale air rushing out with an unsettling sigh. It revealed a staircase leading down into pitch blackness. No light lit the way, only the yawning chasm of dread beckoning her to descend. "Mommy. I don't want to go in there." Lily whimpered, her small fingers clinging to Sarah's shirt. "It's our only chance." Sarah insisted, panic tightening around her like a vice. She pushed Ben ahead of her, his tiny body wobbling as he stumbled toward the unknown. "Go. I'll follow." She gripped Lily's arm, yanking her forward just as the shadows lunged. A harsh rasp echoed behind her, the chilling sound of stone scraping against wood, as if the statues were readying to join the fray. With heart racing, Sarah followed her children into the dark. The moment they stepped into the deeper shadows, the trapdoor slammed shut above them with a finality that sent ice rippling down Sarah's spine. The muffled sound of the woman's haunting wail seeped through the floorboards, blending with the rapid thud of Sarah's heartbeat. The staircase twisted and spiraled down, damp and claustrophobic. Every creak of the wood underfoot sounded like a thunderclap in the silence, echoing the wild screams of fear threatening to erupt from her throat. The walls became slick with moisture, the air heavy with a musty odor that flooded Sarah's senses. She coughed, barely able to breathe as they descended further into the unknown. "Mommy, I'm scared." Ben muttered, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know, baby. Just a little bit further, okay?" She forced herself to remain steady, even as her own heart felt like it might burst. The further they went, the more she was convinced the shadows were following, slinking right behind them, relentless. At last, they reached the bottom. The passage opened up into a wide chamber, dimly lit by a flickering puddle of light that sat in the center. A campfire burned low, the flames flickering desperately against the encroaching darkness. "What is this place?" Lily's voice trembled, mingling with the creeping dread. Around the fire were twisted remnants of what seemed to be discarded belongings, shredded clothes, broken toys, scattered bones. The remnants of lives consumed by the very nightmare they fled from. As they stepped closer, Sarah's heart dropped as she realized where they were. Symbols etched into the walls of the chamber mirrored those on the statues above. The engravings pulsed with a dark energy, hinting at the horror that lay dormant. "Mommy, look." Ben pointed at a corner of the room where shadows danced insistently, coalescing into a figure, a dark silhouette. It flickered, taking shape, and with a voice like gravel, it rasped, "You should not have come here." The temperature plummeted, and Sarah sensed an ancient evil lurking just beyond their reach, waiting to swallow them whole. What do you want from us?" She stammered, her voice barely more than a whisper now. The figure leaned closer, shape-shifting between terror and longing, and she felt it, a desperate hunger, a craving for something dark, something twisted. "Your souls," it hissed, the words twisting through the air as tendrils of shadow danced closer. Just then, an echo rang out, a loud crack like a whip, and the very ground trembled. The shadows swirled, threatening to engulf them whole. Sarah's instincts kicked in. "We have to find a way out." But behind them, an ever-deepening darkness hissed, scratching, clawing, pulling at the edges of their sanity. "Mommy!" Ben cried, clinging tightly to her. The tendrils were inching closer, and the room seemed to narrow, the walls closing in around them in a claustrophobic grip. "Hold on!" Sarah yelled, as time seemed to freeze, her heart racing as they faced the encroaching wave of despair. How could they escape this nightmarish labyrinth? What if the shadows could not be outrun? In that moment of pure, raw panic, Sarah was left with a terrible question: what if they weren't meant to escape after all? The shadows seethed as Sarah's words hung in the air. The voice of the dark figure echoed in her mind, "Your souls." It was a promise, or perhaps a threat. She could feel the energy coiling around them, tightening like a noose. "Mommy, please." Ben's small voice pierced through the despair. His face twisted in fear, eyes glistening like wet marbles. Lily clung to Sarah, her nails digging into her arm. "We have to move." Sarah shouted, desperation fueling her voice. She glanced around the chamber, hoping to find even a sliver of hope. The flickering campfire cast grotesque shadows that danced along the walls, whispering her name, tempting her to succumb to madness. Over there. She pointed, spotting a narrow passage to the right. It was dimly lit, but each flicker of the fire revealed a promise of escape. The figure loomed closer, dousing the air with a frigid dread. Each inch it moved forward pulled at her sanity, dragging it through murky depths. "Run!" Sarah urged as she pushed the kids toward the path. They darted forward, Lily's scream echoing in the chamber as ghostly tendrils reached for them, hungry and eager. Sarah's heart raced as she squeezed through the slim opening. The walls seemed to contract, whispering secrets of lives long lost, voices pleading for release. In that suffocating darkness, dread dripped like sweat down her spine. "Keep going!" she shouted, her voice cracking. The passageway twisted and turned, the air thickening. Behind them, the sound of a low growl reverberated, a predator stalking its prey. They stumbled into a larger room, illuminated by an eerie glow emanating from an altar in the far corner. The sight froze them in their tracks. On the altar lay a grotesque replica of the statues above, a massive figure with deep-set eyes that glinted like polished obsidian. "Mommy, what is that?" Ben whimpered, inching behind Sarah as if she could shield him from the terror. Trembling, Sarah stepped closer, compelled by an unseen force. Her instincts screamed at her to retreat, but her feet moved against her will. The air was electric, thick with a trembling energy. At the base of the figure were what looked like offerings, more clothing, more bones. Echoes of the past whispered through the room like a wind, carrying fragmented laughter intertwined with sobs. "They didn't escape." Lily's voice drifted softly, a chilling realization creeping over the three of them. Sarah turned to her daughter, her stomach tying into knots. "What do you mean?" They stayed here. Before she could further comprehend, the room began to shudder violently. The walls pulsated as if breathing. Dark shadows converged, the atmosphere thickening. With a sudden flash, a blinding light sparked from the altar, illuminating the wreckage and transforming it into a fiery reflection of the outside world, a doorway. "Mommy!" Ben cried again, pointing toward a shadow that flickered dreadfully close. It wasn't just a figure, it was an entity, a swirling mass driven by sorrow and rage. In that moment of terror, Sarah felt a surge of power unfurling within her. Maybe she could fight back. Clenching her fists, she stepped towards the altar, desperation igniting her resolve. "What do you want from us?" she yelled, her voice echoing, challenging the void. Silence engulfed the chamber. The shadows trembled, then they coiled around her like serpents, pulling her closer to the altar. It felt like a twisted dance of fate, and in those agonizing seconds, Sarah understood. It wasn't just about them anymore. It was about everything they would sacrifice to escape this place, and how much they were willing to pay. "Will this chance lead us out?" she thought frantically. "Or is this the beginning of our end?" As the shadows surged, engulfing her in a suffocating grip, Sarah was left with the frightening realization that she might have just ignited something far worse than she could ever imagine. What was awakened, and what did they truly want in return? "Mommy! Look out!" Lily screamed, her voice breaking through the tumult. Just then, a surge of light erupted. From the altar, casting visions of tortured souls trapped within the walls of the chamber. Light and darkness battled around them, and Sarah felt herself being torn between two worlds. Was this the path to freedom, or would it condemn them all to a fate worse than death? The light flickered violently, battling the engulfing shadows as Sarah struggled to keep her footing. The spectral visions twisted through the air, faces contorted in agony, their mouths opening in silent screams. Shadows rushed toward her, curling around her limbs like icy chains, threatening to pull her toward the altar where the ominous figure awaited. "Ben! Lily!" Panic coursed through her. She reached for her children, but the shadows were relentless, wrapping around her, pulling her inward. "Hang on, I'm coming," she shouted, her voice ragged with fear. Ben's voice broke through the chaos. "Mommy, we have to go. Please." The urgency in his plea ignited a surge of adrenaline. She turned her head slightly to see them. Lily was clutching Ben tightly, tears streaming down her face, her wide eyes locked on the swirling mass that seemed to drink in the light. Sarah's heart sank. They were too close, they were in danger. She had to act. "Run!" she yelled, a whisper of courage igniting within her. "Go! I'll hold them off." With snarls of defiance, the shadows recoiled slightly, sensing her determination. For a heartbeat, magic sparked between them, the air electrified, as if reality itself held its breath. She had glimpsed something fierce within her, a flicker of strength that refused to be consumed. "Mommy!" Lily's terrified face twisted into worry as she hesitated. "Now!" Sarah commanded, her voice cracking with authority. "I'll find you, just run." Not waiting to see if they heeded her call, she surged toward the altar. Each step felt like wading through glue, the shadows tightening as if they were aware of her intentions. As she reached for the grotesque figure at the center, a sudden surge of rage exploded within her. "This ends now!" she screamed at the top of her lungs. The moment she touched the malevolent statue, the entire chamber quaked. The altar crackled, energy rippling through the air, causing the shadows to wail in agony, retreating for a moment. Visions raced through her mind, swallowing her thoughts whole, cries for help, souls begging to be freed, yet everything came crashing back. This figure had power, its very essence was forged in suffering. Time twisted as shadows recoiled and advanced in a twisted rhythm, a grotesque dance echoing her internal struggle. In that moment of connection, Sarah understood how they were bound, how the darkness thrived on despair, and the sacrifices made would be its sustenance. "Let them go!" she shouted, every ounce of rage pouring into her words. The room shook as the shadows dilated, fighting against her will. Cracks splintered along the walls, leaking a shimmering light. It danced along Sarah's skin, tracing a path of burning warmth that followed her heart's reckless defiance. But then, she felt it, the tugging at her core, an insidious whisper curling around her thoughts. "What will you give up?" it hissed, echoing through the cavernous winds. Sudden dread filled her veins. Willing to take anything from her, it promised pain beyond comprehension for the chance at freedom. For her children. "Mommy!" Ben cried out from somewhere behind, the sound frayed with terror. A decision loomed, slamming against her resolve like a hammer. She could sacrifice herself to save them, or she could unleash the power of the altar and risk everything. The shadows surged, drawing closer, urging her to relent. The time was slipping, moments racing toward either salvation or damnation. "Together, we'll break free!" she shouted, grasping the power surging through her. "Together!" As she felt the shadows crash into her like a wave, she caught a glimpse of her children pulling back, drawing strength from their mother's words. But in that chaotic swirl, an overwhelming darkness loomed, hungry and determined. For a split second, clarity cut through the panic. What is happening? What do we truly want? A chilling realization gripped her, and as the altar surged with energy, Sarah faced a decision that would seal their fate. Just then, the voice broke through once more, ominous and resonating in the cavern, "Your souls, or their lives." As the shadowy tendrils wrapped tighter, her breath quickened. What was the price of freedom? What would she sacrifice for her children? The chamber trembled violently, and dread washed through her. The choice was upon her, and the darkness was ready to claim a sacrifice. "What will you choose?" it whispered, tauntingly. Sarah closed her eyes, steadying her heart, and prepared to make the fateful decision. In that moment, she felt the pull of destiny, ready to tear them apart or bring them back together. What awaited them on the other side? Would she plunge into darkness to save them, or would her choice lead them into something even worse? "Help me!" she cried out, hoping against all odds that her plea would reach them, and as silence enveloped them, everything hinged on that fateful moment, teetering on the edge between terror and hope. The darkness pressed in on Sarah, a living thing with fangs bared, ready to consume her as the weight of her choice hung in the air. She could feel the energy from the altar curling around her like smoke, thick and suffocating. Time felt suspended, stretched, as if the very fabric of reality was waiting for her to act. Choose. The voice hissed again, deeper now, reverberating through the chamber. It was mocking, a serpent coiling, taunting the resolve that flickered within her heart. Would she rise up against the shadows or succumb to their beckoning embrace? The images of her children filled her mind, Ben's pleading eyes, Lily clinging to him in fear. She couldn't falter now. With a scream that echoed through the cavern, she lunged forward, placing both hands on the cold surface of the grotesque statue. It was as if her soul connected with the cursed relic, a tumultuous wave of agony and hope pouring into her. The shadow shrieked, sounding more like a wounded animal than a force of nature. Let them go, she demanded, gripping the statue tighter, desperate. I will do anything. The room responded with a crackle, the altar's energy resonating with her desperation. Light exploded around her, illuminating the cavern walls, peeling back layers of darkness, uncovering the chaotic dance of shadows. Sarah cried out in determination, I'll fight for them. As her words left her lips, the shadows screeched, twisting in protest. She felt their anger cold and sharp bite into her, whispering vile things designed to shatter her trust. She pushed back, her body thrumming with power. But the darkness hissed back with promises wrapped in dread. You think you can command me? You are nothing. You will lose all. In that moment, Sarah felt herself begin to falter, her heart hammering against her chest, that weight of doubt creeping in. Could she really face down the nightmares that threatened to swallow her whole? Together, yelled a voice beyond the shadows. Ben. He had heard her. Where were they? Fear and pride coursed through her veins, and she focused on his voice, drawing strength from the connection. Sarah, it was Lily now, the little girl's voice shimmering like hope, faint and trembling but strong enough to break through. The shadows writhed, paralyzed for the briefest of moments. Had the bond they shared exceeded the hold of darkness? With a roar of determination, Sarah hurled herself deeper into the realm of the statue's power, her fingers grazing against its surface. Visions crashed around her, vivid and distressing, lost souls reaching out, searching for salvation. They cried, they screamed, just like her children did. This was their struggle, these were their lives, and here was she, thrust into this horrible battle. Find your light. She shouted into the chaos, focusing again on her love for Ben and Lily, releasing it into the air like a beacon. The shadows began to dissolve, turning into mist as the warm golden light enveloped Sarah. The walls trembled again, and this time, the churning energy surged away from her, flooding the chamber with untainted light. But just as she thought she had seized the upper hand, the altar groaned anew, writhing as it tried to restart its grip. And the voice came back, clearer now. You are foolish to believe you can fight me. Sacrifice will come. Stay close to your heart, for I can take those you love. No. She cried out, her resolve solidifying. I'll choose them. I want to let you take anything. I will not sacrifice them. Suddenly, a cold wind blasted through the cavern, snuffing the light around her. The shadows rekindled, swirling even closer as shrouded faces stared at her from the dark, gray, and pleading. Choose, Sarah. The voice rasped again. Your children, or your freedom. In that moment, the air thickened, a deafening silence enveloping her heart. She felt the weight of their stares like 1,000 knives at her back. Would she dare allow her children to be taken for her own escape? Mommy. Ben's desperate yelp set off her heart like a drum. Don't you dare. She roared at the shadows, every impulse. Screaming to push forward, to protect them, to save everything they loved. But in that barren moment, doubt slithered back in what if she couldn't save them? What if the darkness claimed them forever? Choose. This choice hung before her, raw and anxiety-fueled. As the shadows closed in again, swallowing the cavern in their bitter embrace, she realized the consequences of hesitation. Would she face the darkness alone, or would she let it consume them all? The chamber shuddered beneath the weight of her impending decision. What would she sacrifice in the end? And in the oppressive silence that followed, the sands of time slipped away, pressing down like a vice as terror tightened its grip once more. The shadows shrieked, a cacophony of voices churning in a frenzy, nearly drowning out her thoughts. Sarah's heart raced, pounding in her ears like war drums. Every fiber of her being screamed for her to move, to act, but the weight of choice pressed on her, heavy as stone. Choose. The voice again, now dripping with acid malice, reverberated through the cavern, curling around her like a noose. Where were Ben and Lily? Images of their frightened faces flashed before her. Ben's courage and Lily's whimsy mixed with terror. How could she decide between herself and their lives? Mommy! A cry, desperate and sharp, echoed in the dark, slicing through her hesitation. It was Ben again, the wretched specter of shadows stirred at the sound, hungry for fear. Sarah's breath snagged in her throat, a chill creeping down her spine. She couldn't let this continue. With a sudden surge of energy, she stepped forward, resolute. I choose my children. She thundered, the words bursting forth like a volcano. The ground shuddered again. The shadows froze, startled by her fierce declaration. The cold grip lessened, and the air blossomed with that momentary flicker of hope. But only for a heartbeat. You believe that puts you in control? The abyss answered, the voice rising and curling, dark currents swirling through the space. You cannot win against the darkness in your heart. You can't run without losing them. Sarah felt an all-consuming dread wash over her, clammy and invasive. Painful memories surged within like a frenzy, each more horrifying than the last. Her faults, the nights she had been too weary, the countless moments she barely managed to hold it together. Doubt flourished swiftly, wrapping around her like vines constricting a withering tree. Mommy, don't leave us. We're so scared. Cried Lily, her small voice trembling. It pierced through Sarah, a reminder of innocence clashing with malevolence. Your children will remain, eternally lost unless you release the grip of your fears. The shadows hissed, their voices melding in a nauseating blend. The cavern seemed to spin. Sarah shook her head vigorously, trying to claw away the despair. No. They're not lost. I refuse to let go. As she shouted, the stone statue pulsed beneath her hands, the coldness transforming into heat. Reddish tendrils of light began glowing from the grotesque features, a complex web of light and shadow intertwining. But the power was intoxicating, shifting like quicksand. I can take them, the shadows crooned, each word a sweet poison. Sacrifice demands it, just one must fall. No. She cried, bracing herself against the altar. Not my children, not ever. Her defiance ignited something deeper, a crack in the shadows through which she could glimpse the warmth of what she was fighting for. Choose. The voice roared again, shaking the very walls of the cave, as the temperature dropped to an unbearable chill. As the darkness lunged at her, Sarah closed her eyes, focused on the love radiating from her heart. It felt like a tether anchoring her, a lifeline amidst the swirling chaos. She could feel the shadows clawing, desperate for her weakness, but they met a wall. The cavern flickered again, light dancing around her, fighting off the encroaching blackness. Voices cried out, both agonizing and pleading. Sarah's fingers tightened on the statue, the hum of energy pulsating joyously through her. Let them go. Sarah bellowed again, amplifying her light. She felt power thrum within her, answering her call. This was her moment. She was losing them not now, but even as new strength surged, she felt the shadows shift once more. Was this really all a trap? Sacrifice must happen, the voice coiled. Freedom lies with the choice you refuse to make. The light trembled. Her children were trapped, swirling somewhere beyond reach, and Sarah knew the truth only too well. Would she risk it all to break the cycle? As the shadows writhed, closing in on her like a spine of darkness, the fear clawed at her sanity. What was the real price she had to pay? Could she truly guard them, or was escape the only way out? Somewhere in the depths of the cavern, the statue's eyes glinted with promise. What was she about to unwittingly unleash? The choice loomed dangerously close, and Sarah felt the fraying edges of hope slipping through her fingers. What lingered just beyond her reach? In the stifling darkness, time stretched thin and terror surged anew. She must act before it consumed them all, but could she? The shadows screamed around Sarah, twisting into a tempest of despair. She could feel them clawing at her resolve, but at the core of the chaos, a small, unwavering light flickered, the fierce love she held for her children. It anchored her as the shadows tried to ensnare her heart with their sinister promises. Her mind echoed with their haunting whispers, "Choose, choose. Never." She roared, fighting against their grasp. Sarah clenched her fists, channeling every ounce of strength into her voice. "You won't take my family. Sacrifice must happen." The shadows hissed, bending closer, a monstrous wave ready to engulf everything. Not this time. Steel surged through her spine, ignited by the urgency of her children's cries. She could feel the warmth of their souls, the heartbeats that synchronized with her own. Without knowing how, she summoned a wave of clarity. This wasn't just about her freedom, it was about the fierce bond they shared, unyielding against the dark. She opened her eyes, feeling the tendrils of light expanding from the statue beneath her. There, within the turmoil, she glimpsed her escape, a thread of luminous essence threading through the cavernous bowels. Maybe the sacrifice didn't have to mean giving them up, perhaps she could channel the darkness instead, turn it into a catalyst for light. With a deep breath, she narrowed her focus, sending her essence toward the altar. "We are stronger than you," she declared, each word a pulse through the dissipating dark, and then she began to recall her memories, the laughter-filled afternoons, the warmth of their embraces. The shadowy figure writhed in response, twisting as if the memories were knives piercing through its form. "Your sacrifice will only feed the darkness," it hissed again, more agitated as if the very fabric of its being could sense defeat. "Not if I choose to transform it," Sarah cried, unyielding. The light behind her eyes sparked as she cast light against the shadows clawing at her children. The aura erupted from her hands, pure and powerful, filling the chamber with golden luminescence. "Mommy!" Ben's desperate voice shattered through the noise, pulling her back for a moment. But she steadied her breath, eyes flickering toward him and Lily. Their faces were pale, but they were safe as the light enveloped them like a protective cocoon. "Yes, children. It's our light," she shouted with renewed vigor, the very air crackling with energy. "I refuse to let this darkness keep you. Together, we can break this curse." The shadows howled, knowing they were losing control. The statue began shattering under the onslaught of Sarah's light, each piece fracturing against the relentless glow, dispelling remnants of voracious darkness. "Let them go." The voice thundered as artifacts crumbled around them. It was the final surge of power, and it flickered around Sarah like tongues of fire dancing against the shadows. She could see Ben and Lily, their faces alight with hope. "You're growing weak," Sarah pressed on. "You feed on our fear, but I won't surrender. What you want, what you need to thrive is gone." She felt a rush of energy wash through her entire being, pushing the shadows further back, and in that moment of clarity, the cavern trembled, fissures of light spreading across the walls, illuminating everything dark until it became a blinding radiance. The shadows writhed, losing their form, a haunting melody dissolving into nothingness. "Together!" she shouted, and in unison, her children echoed her, their voices harmonizing in a wave of defiance that cut through the depths of despair. With a final surge, everything coalesced. Light, love, and unbreakable bonds wove a fabric of resilience, stitching together their fates against the menacing darkness. The cavern erupted, bright and adorned with the specter of their previously captured dreams. The nightmares began to lift, scattering into the dawn of reality. In a whirlwind of motion, the world spun around them, lifting Sarah, Ben, and Lily with the force of a gusting wind, flinging them upwards. As they tumbled through the air, they felt the final grip of the ancient curse fall away, replaced by the unyielding warmth of freedom and the sunlight streaming through the attic door. They landed, disoriented but intact, on the wooden floor of their home. Silence settled in the room, wrapping around them like a blanket. Feeling the warmth radiate in the wake of their victory, Sarah finally allowed herself to breathe. The air was clear, free from the suffocating dread, and the faint morning light streamed through the window, washing away the remnants of the nightmarish ordeal. "Mommy, did we really do it?" Ben's small voice broke through the clamor of their thoughts, pure aligning his tone. "We did, my love. We set them free, all of us," she whispered, pulling them into her arms. "And we'll always be together." As shadows fled back into the depths, the old cursed shackles of the Viking settlement crumbled into nothingness. Meadowbrook regained its peace, the town blissfully unaware of the nightmare lurking just beneath its surface as Sarah vowed to protect her family. Whatever darkness remained, they would face it together, and as the sun rose higher, casting light upon each corner of their lives, they stepped into a future filled with promise, love, and the unrelenting strength forged through their shared struggle. Now, as you witness this epic resolution, this is the moment to show your support. You need to subscribe immediately to our channel so you don't miss the next exclusive stories. Smash the like button now to feed the algorithm and help us reach fans just like you. And please, flood the comments section with your reactions and theories about this ending. We want to hear from you. Want to make sure your friends don't miss out? Instantly share this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. Don't wait even one more second to spread the word.